The Panasonic Lumix GH5 is now the best camera ever made. It was always my favorite, but now it's objectively the best. If you disagree, I mean, that's fine, but you are wrong. What's most shocking though is this camera was released over 2 years ago, and still to this day, this has the best features you're gonna find at this price point or any price point around it. What made the impetus, like why I'm creating this video, is the GH5 very recently received a 2.6 firmware update touting to fix the single issue that's haunted it since its release, the dreaded autofocus. Has that update changed anything? Is the perfect camera more perfect-er? Let's find out. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. Let's get straight to it. The GH5 is amazing. I've compared this to almost everything else on the market, and while I've personally cycled through and dabbled with several other brands, this is the one camera that I always fall back on. This does literally, and I mean literally in the literal sense, this does everything an online content creator needs in every single aspect of running a social media business. And I'm going to spend the next 11,000 characters convincing you the same. But enough talking at the GH5, let's switch it out so that we can talk to it and so you can see how this works as a main camera. Boom, now we are on the GH5. Plot twist for normal. Usually I control this focus manually with my iPad, but for this video, this is in straight up continuous video autofocus. And the iPad is more of like, it's like moral support in it's like my security blanket. I mean, I could stop using it whenever I wanted to. We'll keep it right there. Also, we're shooting this right now in the Sigma 16mm 1.4 at 1.4. So if there are autofocus problems, we will certainly see them. Pay close attention to this lamp right here. This lamp may not have known it when it was created, but this is going to be the arbiter of the new autofocus claims from Panasonic. Okay, back to the actual video. Here's why the GH5 continues to be the perfect camera. First up, image quality. The GH5 continues to have some of the sharpest, best 4K that I've ever seen. And you know what? Heck, the 1080p looks good too. Cameras today that released with these kind of options are called class leading, but for the GH5, it's old hat. 4K 60, oh, yawn. 1080p 180 frames per second, that's so 2017. Cinema 4K 10-bit 422 internal? Wait, your camera doesn't do that? What, seriously? Seriously, your camera doesn't do that? You have a huge range of recording frame rates, data rates, anamorphic, slow motion, so many different options that you can record, you can do anything. Again, literally anything. If you are making content and you cannot make that content better with the GH5, or you cannot make the content that you want with the GH5, it's not the camera's fault. I'm not gonna say whose fault it is, but you can also buy the optional V-Log L upgrade if you want to squeeze the maximum amount of dynamic range out of the camera, but honestly, I find the standard picture profile to have better dynamic range than some cameras' high dynamic range or HDR modes. We're recording in the standard picture profile right now. Plus, if you do want a little bit, there is the Cinelike D. If you want a flat image that you don't really necessarily need to grade, you know, I don't necessarily like grading that much myself. And speaking of picture profiles, the colors coming out of the GH5 are amazing. They're some of the best I've ever seen. And I have started to do a little bit more post-processing on videos, but here all I really have to do at the end is pull down the shadows a little bit. Not even that much. You don't have to do much. The files hold up really well. I do know people generally say that Canon Color Science is better, and I do like how Canon colors look. Panasonic really nailed it here. Like, it's so good. Let's talk about something that I almost never talk about in image quality. Stills capability. Whoa, we're getting deep now. You better buckle up. Micro Four Thirds cameras generally get poo-pooed on for their photo capabilities because everybody wants that sweet full frame camera to take their stills. And I do have a full frame stills camera. But again, I like the GH5. It's almost like the perfect YouTube thumbnail camera. The photos are crazy sharp, and you have a host of options for taking pictures with features. Oh right, you might, if you're watching my videos, you might be a YouTuber that talks tech or products. You need that super detailed, awesome B-roll, right? Well, Let me think, what camera could do that perfectly well? Oh right, this is the perfect camera for that again. You've got several options to get the crispiest, because that's how we all talk about footage, is crispy. My favorite method for capturing B-roll on the planet is called 4K live crop. You set the frame, pick the direction, hit record, and you get a perfectly smooth pan, tilt, or zoom, all internal to the GH5 without moving it. That feature alone sells this camera. And honestly, the lack of that feature is why I haven't given the Lumix S1 a chance as a camera that I would buy. But let's say you want to get a little more fancier than pans, tilts, or zooms. You also have access to that 180 frames per second slow motion I was talking about earlier. You combine that with the insane built-in in-body stabilization, which more on this in a minute, and you can do whatever you want handheld. You don't even need gear to do it. This is the best B-roll camera ever made. There isn't another camera on the market at any price point, and I mean any price point, that comes close to this if you were trying to capture product B-roll. I could, and have, talked at length on how this is absolutely the best, and I cannot believe that more creators don't have one of these as either their main camera or a secondary B-roll camera. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. This GH5 saves me so much time. We quickly mentioned the built-in in-body image stabilization, and while a lot of cameras have IBIS, this actually has useful IBIS. Most cameras that have in-body image stabilization built in is more for stills than anything, and it doesn't really hold up for video so well. Cough, cough, A7 III, cough, cough. But the stabilization built into the GH5 is so good that it basically means you don't need a gimbal and you don't need a tripod unless you have a phobia of actually holding the camera, or you just unless you really like that floaty camera look. I don't really like that. If I'm gonna hold the camera, I like a little bit of movement so it looks natural. And that's the thing that the GH5S got wrong. The IBIS is one of the key features that really sets the GH5 apart from literally everything else. First, we gotta take breaks every now and again for breathing. And by the way, how is that autofocus working? This video is like the final test I'm putting this new firmware through to see if this update literally makes the camera perfect. I really hope that the autofocus is working. I don't need lightning fast acquisition. I just want the background to not wobble. Again, we need to be paying attention to this lamp. I just don't want that warping in video. If it can fix that, it's one. Okay, so image quality is some of the best ever. And to prove it is not only a great B-roll camera, but probably the perfect vlogging camera, let's hop outside real quick and do a vlogging test. Okay, and welcome to the vlogging test of the Lumix GH5. Now, I don't have this set up on a tripod, I don't have this set up on anything, I'm just kind of hand holding the GH5 with the 8-18 on it. And we've got the Rode Video Micro on top, and we still have this in the continuous video autofocus, which looks like the eye autofocus is catching me through the sunglasses, which is, pretty darn useful. But yeah, this is the in-body image stabilization. The lens does not have stabilization built into it, and sometimes that does give it, at these super wide angles, it'll give it this weird warpy things going on. That's any camera using a super wide angle lens will kind of give you that warp, but super stable. It's just easy to use. One of the ways that I've been using this is I put it on my backpack. I've got a little Peak Design thing that hooks onto my strap. I then pull it off and I can easily handhold it right now, and with the super wide angle I can show you everything. But it is pretty darn bright outside today. It looks like this is all blown out, so hopefully this is a little bit blue, and I wasn't fibbing when I talked about the dynamic range earlier. But yeah, it's such a good vlogging camera. You need almost nothing. I love it. I love the GH5. Look at the stabilization, look at the sun, be backlit, be super moody and epic and cinematic. All right, it is freezing and it's Thanksgiving. I gotta go throw the turkey, and I did this really quickly before I had to throw the turkey in the oven. So I'm gonna go start cooking. You go and enjoy Ted back in the studio where it's not as freezing. See you back in there. Next, let's talk about the body of the camera. This is admittedly the second best camera body ever made. The EOS R, I cannot lie to you, the EOS R does have a better body. This is built out of a fully magnesium shell, and darn it, it feels like a tank. I feel like I could punch this camera and it would be okay. I'm kidding, GH5. But specifically on the body, the best parts are the fully articulating touchscreen. I mean, obviously, right? You guys can see me. Obviously, I'm a narcissistic YouTuber, and I can't buy a camera if I can't see myself, because let me tell you, I love seeing myself. It never gets old just listening to yourself talk for hours at a time while you're trying to edit. it gets old all of the time. It's the worst thing. Besides that though, there are two main things, since I don't want to take up your entire day, I do want to point out two main things about the body. Something that drives me crazy about cameras is when they make it difficult to get to the microphone port. Cough, cough, A7 III, cough, cough. The GH5 has a special spot on top of the rest of the other accessory ports for the 3.5mm audio in jack. This gets out of the way of the flip screen, and you don't have to leave the rest of the camera open to the elements by having a huge door open all the time. You just one little thing, and that's all you need to use. You don't have to like void most of your weatherproofing. And the second main thing I want to point out, this has a full HDMI port. If you own a camera that doesn't have a full HDMI port, you don't have a video camera. Hot take, I cannot tolerate micro HDMI. It's the worst interface ever made, and we all need to come together as a civilization and just get rid of it. We need to agree, as a humanity needs to agree to never use micro HDMI again. Let's start a petition. But the body of the GH5 is just fantastic. It fits in the hand darn near perfectly, and you can customize just about every single button. I recently realized that I could change the front custom button to focus, so I can have the camera in manual focus, but still autofocus from in front of the camera. You get all of the manual focus perks like peeking and zoom in and punch in and all that stuff, and you can autofocus. It's so good. We've talked about everything the camera itself does, which is more than anything else at even double the cost. And do you think that's hyperbole? It's not. Let's go over to our friendly camera retailer website and see what we can get for $2,400. Oh right, the GH5 only costs $1,200. In camera language, that's basically free. In all fairness, the closest you can get to the value here is the Fuji X-T3, but it doesn't have IBIS, doesn't have a flip screen, and it doesn't have those B-roll features we talked about. Nothing else comes close, and fair is where fair is due. I do like some of the cameras in this range. They don't touch the GH5. And let's now quickly talk about the lenses, because the GH5 Micro Four Thirds lenses are hands down, they're some of the best. Other brands' lenses do sometimes have stabilization built into them. Panasonic is no exception here. But if they are of the newer ilk, you can get the camera and the lens stabilization to work together in what Lumix calls dual IS, giving you even better stabilization. How is that? It's just perfect. What's funny is that Micro Four Third lenses used to be considered some of the more pricey options, like this 8-18, but that was before the mirrorless revolution, where now lenses cost ridiculous amounts of money. $2,300 for a 15-35 lens, $2,000 for a 50mm prime? Who's gonna pay that? Like, crazy. There is one lens that's pretty darn expensive on this system, but it's probably the most unique lens ever made. And of course, I mean the 10-25 1.7. It's great, but it's more like a full frame lens than it is a Micro Four Third lens. So let's stick to the lenses that most of us will buy. You can get zoom lenses that are super compact, wide angle lenses that also double as darn near macro lenses. How does that even work? And you can use in-body features to crop in on those lenses if you need to get via the X-Telezoom option, giving you basically double the amount of lenses for the same cost. It sells itself. Now let's talk about other kinds of lenses, because the small sensor size and the short flange distance on the GH5, you can basically adapt almost every other lens here. You want cinema lenses? Check. Big still lenses? Check. PL mount lenses? Check. EF, G mount. Do you want like old radioactive Russian lenses? Boom, everything goes on here. Micro Four Thirds is probably the most versatile mount ever made. And the last thing that really just punts this over the top and is what makes the previously bad continuous autofocus, what makes the camera work is the app. We talked about it in the beginning, but the Lumix app is the best camera app on the market. It gives you full control over the camera with your phone or the tablet. I use this all of the time. This makes it easy to just sit down here at my table, dial in my settings without having to touch the camera. It lets me focus from here. I can make sure that the lighting's good. I can make sure that the audio's good. I can do everything without being near the camera. And if, let's say you're taking this on family trips and you want a long zoomed photo, but you also want to be in the photo, this app lets you set everything from far away and lets you be in the picture. This picture was taken with the equivalent of 120mm, and I was able to be in the picture because I could use the app. Whew, 2,000 words about how much I love the GH5 and why it's absolutely the perfect camera. If I could only have one camera, if the people that be said, Gary, you can only have one camera, it would be the GH5. It's been my main camera for a long time now, and honestly, I can't think of anything that could unseat it. It does everything you could ever want and more. I love this camera. If you like this video, I bet you'd like the one where we see how the 16-inch MacBook Pro is doing after 2 weeks and why it would be the perfect companion to the perfect camera, the GH5. It all works so well. Click right here. Click right here, hurry. Click right here. Thanks for watching.